Hi everyone, welcome back to my Micronaut series videos. Till now, we saw about the basic concepts of Micronaut, creating CRUD APIs and some integrations like Flyway and Shadlock. But as any enterprise application these days is not limited to a single service, we have generally microservice architecture these days where multiple services have to communicate with each other. There are generally two ways of this inter-service communication, which are synchronous and asynchronous communications. In synchronous communication, generally one service calls other service using its REST APIs and waits for the response from second service. In async communication, message brokers like Kafka or RabbitMQ are used, in which calling service does not wait for the response. We will first see about synchronous communication between microservices using REST calls and various things that need to be taken care of to avoid problems. So in our example, we will now create preference service whose responsibility will be to store the user preferences. So these user preferences might be the things like users preferred local diet and whether he wants the notifications to be on or off. So here the user ID will be stored, which will be the ID of the user for which the preferences are being stored. And this will be a preferences table, and we will create this table in our preference service using Flyway, just like we created it in our user service. Also, generally, to avoid the single point of failure, we have separate database or schema for this table for preference service. So in microservices, generally we do not share tables. So if you see this configuration in application.yaml, we have given separate database, which is preference DB, and here this preferences table will get created after we start the service. Also we will expose get and post APIs from this preference service. The post API will be used for saving the user preferences, and get API will accept the user ID, and it will accept the user ID as path parameter and will return preferences for that user ID from preferences table as the response. We have also integrated OpenAPI and Swagger UI in this service. So in pom.xml, here you have to add OpenAPI in the path annotation processor paths, and also have to give you have to give the dependency of Swagger UI, Swagger annotations, and you have to configure your application with this annotation as @OpenAPI definition. So Open API specification is an API description format for our REST APIs, and it allows us to describe our entire API. So this is generally required and helpful as we can share this Swagger URL with our front-end or application like Android or iOS teams or other dependent backend teams which are going to consume our APIs. In application.yaml, we have also given this port number as 8081 because our user service is already running on our port 8080, which is the default port. So now once we are ready to start this service, we can start our application, and we can go to the Swagger URL to try out the APIs. So currently I have already created these two user preferences for user ID 1 and 2, which are like en, veg, and true as notification off. So we can go to Swagger. This is the Swagger URL, and here you get the definitions of multiple APIs. Here you can go to our get API, which is like preferences slash user ID, and we can try out this API using user ID 1, and this will be the response of this API, which is the which is coming from our which is coming from our preferences table. So if you look at this diagram, this is coming from this preferences table. And now we are ready to integrate this service with our user service. So in next video we will modify the get API of our fetching of user details to fetch the user preferences as well from preference service along with the user details from user DB. So currently this API was only fetching the user details from user DB. Now we will also make the API call to this preference service to fetch the preferences for this user and then return the response together with user details as well as the preferences for that user. So basically we will see the inter-service communication using Micronaut's declarative HTTP client in our next video.